At the edge of hell lies the Shadow Labyrinth, the final labyrinth shown to mankind by the Shadow Worlds. A great destruction dragon looms above the heroes standing in its way. Countless people have died over the past 10 years, but this is the end. Desir, one of the heroes, promises to kill the dragon and bring an end to their terrible situation. The dragon rears back and prepares to unleash an attack. Before it can wipe the heroes out, Desir seals the dragon's magic, and the others charge forward. A fierce battle ensues, but the heroes emerge victorious and look forward to being able to escape. Things aren't quite that easy though, and they don't receive the expected message telling them that their objective is complete. They were supposed to kill the dragon, so why isn't it ending? The 6 heroes are the only survivors of an original 150 million, the entire population of magic-empowered humans. While they wait, they congratulate Desir for his amazing contribution. Some of them figured he would die long ago, yet he managed to analyze and seal a dragon's magic despite only being a 3rd circle magician. Not even a 7th circle magician, the strongest they have, has such amazing calculation skills. How could he be only a 3rd circle magician when he has such amazing skills? Unfortunately, he wasn't educated properly due to his origins as a commoner. If he had been, maybe he could have done even better. That's enough of that topic though, and they begin talking about their plans for when they get back to Earth. From honoring the dead to figuring out how to avoid a shadow world of such scale from ever appearing again, they all have a goal in mind. All save for Azist, who remains silent. Desir begins to tell them his plan when they find out why they haven't returned to Earth. The dragon isn't dead yet. They made sure it was no longer breathing, but a dragon's heart stores mana that goes out of control when the dragon dies. Just like an overheating engine, the heart begins to explode. It's the first time in human history that they've killed a dragon, so they had no way of knowing beforehand. They're right next to ground zero as an incalculable amount of energy explodes, and all they can think to do is send their final prayers. The world ends, and Desir finds himself in another time. He definitely just died, so what's going on? Instead of whatever waits in the afterlife, he finds himself back in time when he was trying to enroll in Hebrion Academy. One of the professors, Brigitte, greets the aspiring students and explains that pending an admission test, only 600 will be accepted into the academy. For the entry exam, they are to clear a shadow world specifically designed for the test, not a true shadow world. With that, Year 3613's 172nd admission test will begin in 2 hours. Desir goes reeling, still shocked by what's happening. Hebrion, known as the continent's best magic academy, is the school he graduated from more than 10 years ago. He's back in the year 3613. The Shadow World started in 3616, and he was trapped in the Shadow Labyrinth for 10 years until the world ended in 3626, which means he went back 13 years in time. Was all of the sacrifice and hardship the world experienced during that time in vain? Desir breaks down crying. Not long later, he recovers a bit and takes stock of his situation. He still remembers everything and everyone, and as he's thinking things over, a girl approaches who says she was looking for him. The girl, Ladoria von der Riech, a 2nd year at the academy, is his mentor. Desir remembers her as a genius fire element magician who reached 6th circle and who always finished first in her class in Hebrion as a model student. It's clear that he's worried about something, and she tries to comfort him and tell him that the Shadow World is a test that's much easier than a real Shadow World. It's just to see if candidates are capable of joining the war against Shadow Worlds. She looks at his information and sees that he's a commoner. That won't be an issue for getting admitted, but it means he'll get assigned to the beta class, which doesn't receive a proper education, no matter how well he does. It's all part of the hierarchy that exists within the academy. Aristocrats are in the alpha class, and commoners are in the beta class. A commoner is a commoner in their eyes. If he's going to be entering a shadow world, Ladoria wants to make sure he at least knows enough about them ahead of time. She begins to question him. Of course, since he's from the future that struggled with Shadow World so much, he's easily able to tell her that they are a type of parallel universe, which represents the greatest threat mankind has ever faced. One Shadow World happens every year, and there are an infinite variety of them. Some of the most dangerous Shadow Worlds are based on incidents and events of the past, and they're divided into ranks based on how tough the Shadow World is judged to be. The worst part about Shadow Worlds is that they eat away at the world and slowly cover the area around where they appear in the fatal black fog. Ladoria is a bit taken aback by his passionate, detailed answer for a moment before explaining that the League of Western Kingdoms and the Hebrion Academy are the 2 authorities that oversee the Shadow Worlds. There's a 3rd faction called the Outers, but she withholds that information because it isn't important at the moment. The only way to stop a Shadow World is to raid and clear it by completing the Shadow World's purpose. Everything revolves around clearing the Shadow Worlds. Lodoria sees that he knows everything he needs to, and they head inside Hebrion Academy's main building. The inside is a familiar sight to him. Soon they're approached by a guy named Elheim, one of Lodoria's biggest school enemies, who insults her height right off the bat. The two exchange an intense back and forth conversation for a moment until Elheim finds out that Desir is a commoner. Elheim is delighted that his mentee is in the same group as Desir so that he can have his mentee do anything it takes to eliminate hers. Elheim even reveals that his mentee is a magic knight, something that no commoner stands a chance against. Desir smiles as the girl steps forward and introduces herself as Azest Kingscrown. Pulling up her information, Lodoria sees she's an ice element magic knight, with arcane magic, excellent sword fighting skills, and is rated as a third circle magician. Lodoria is positive that her mentee will lose now, and Elheim tells him just to give up as he and his mentee pass. Despite the threat, Desir only smiles and chuckles. All of the examinees are then called to gather at the test site. At the test site itself, Desir is told to stay still by a girl he recognizes as Romantica. Forgetting himself for a moment, he rushes forward and hugs her. Of course, since it's the past, she has no idea who this creep trying to hug her is. He realizes his mistake and pulls away from her as she gives him a terrified look. He remembers the absolute despair and sorrow he felt when she died in his original timeline. Given his second chance, he inwardly swears that he'll never again leave her to suffer. If he's going to do that, he'll have to pass the exam first. His Group D's examination is announced as taking place on the 10th level Shadow World of Ernesty Plains Palace. Since lower ranks mean a stronger Shadow World, level 10 means they'll have the easiest one. They don't even have to fight each other. The only condition is to reach the finish line, located about 8 kilometers away before the other contestants. Fighting isn't necessary, but the use of magic and attacking other competitors is permitted. Safety systems are in place to reduce pain by 80% and expel them from the Shadow World if they receive life-threatening injuries or declare surrender. Romantica and the other competitor are certain that Desir and Azest won't be able to compete against them and wish each other a good race. The exam doors open and they move to stand at the starting line and wait for the race to start. Desir wonders if Azest has returned as he has, but then she speaks just to tell him that he's weak, has the lowest possible magic level, and has less than the average physical capability. She coldly calculates that the best he could ever attempt is the 6th level Shadow World. His hands start to tense, and he wonders if she's trying to start a fight. Insulting him again, she tells him to relax because she has no intention of attacking someone as weak as him. The race starts, and Desir is immediately left in the dust with Romantica. He keeps acting strangely and making comments like he knows her until she reaches forward and uses a spell, Arrow Sweep. Meanwhile, the professors watch the exams and comment on having a magic knight. She's in Group D with a commoner, so they feel a bit sorry for him. Back in the test, Azest and the other competitor race ahead, competing for first place, until Arrow Sweep rushes in and tries to force them back to the starting line. In an astonishing display of skill, Azest cuts through the wind and causes trees to crash into and eliminate the other competitor. Romantica turns on Desir and gives him a chance to surrender. Of course, he declines the chance and just continues to smile. She uses Wind Strike, a second circle magic, and bombards him with power that sends the area up in smoke. Not even a second circle magician would be able to block such an attack, so she's certain that the commoner is taken care of now. Much to her surprise, he emerges unscathed from the smoke behind her and praises her attacks. More than that, he gives her advice and tells her that she had low accuracy because she neglected to control the airflow to focus on speed, which meant that just a slight adjustment to his trajectory was enough to make it completely miss his target. Romantica, of course, is extremely confused. How is he not hurt? He reveals that he simply neutralized the spell using inverse operation. She thinks he's messing with her. How could a mere first circle commoner do something like that? Usually only those with a thorough understanding of magic and runes can pull off an inverse operation, and the operator has to belong to a higher circle than the caster. She attacks him again with a new spell, Venom Wind. Desir doesn't even try to dodge and tells her to watch closely. Then he announces what he's doing as he adjusts specific spots of the attack's airflow to make it completely miss. She starts to lose hope and wonders if somehow the commoner is in a completely different league. Desir is done wasting time though. He has someone else he has to defeat. Romantica still refuses to admit that she lost. While she's shouting that she'll just attack more since he can't use magic, Desir inwardly admits that she's strong, but strength alone isn't enough to cut it. Before he ends things there for the moment, Desir tells her that she failed to notice 3 things during their encounter. 1. He can use magic, albeit feebly. 2. She was never his ultimate goal. And 3. It's a race, not a magic battle. He casts Grease, a simple first circle magic that removes friction, but she doesn't see any effect. It wasn't a dud. He asks her what she thinks he cast grease on and reveals he cast it on himself. What happens if something without friction experiences a great force? Obviously, it'll move at a tremendous speed. To her shock, he casts a fireball behind himself and blasts forward in a blur, catching up to Azist in only a few moments. The finish line is in sight, but he's moving faster than she can. She decides she'll have to eliminate him then and there if she wants to win. Instead of underestimating him as a commoner, she uses the entirety of her power and chants out a spell, Magic Arrows of Prey, that covers the sky above him. Her casting speed was incredible, but Desir still thinks she's underestimating him. He uses inverse operation and dismisses all 180 magic arrows before they fire. When she sees that his computation speed is higher than his 6 circles, she casts again and immediately launches a spell before he can take control of it. The arrows surge at him, but he manages to survive by slightly adjusting the course of each arrow away from his vital areas. She only has 21 arrows worth of power left, and he's even controlling 4 of them. It's clear she won't be able to defeat him with 21 arrows if more than 100 couldn't. Instead, she changes strategy and masses one large spell to hit him with. Thinking fast, Desir uses inverse operation to transform his 4 arrows worth of power into a similar spell that he collides with hers, as he positions himself so that the resulting explosion launches him forward. She's run out of magic, so she unsheathes her sword and swings at him as he passes. Not even that is enough to stop him, and he blasts through the finish line and takes the top spot. After the exam, the professors discuss the results. It's pretty clear that most believe that Alpha class should be reserved for the aristocracy, but when Desir is announced as the winner, most of the professors are shocked that a first circle commoner could defeat their Magic Knight prospect. Though, at the end of the day, he's still a commoner. Despite Brigida's recommendation that he be placed in Alpha class, the other professors, especially Professor Fergman, argue strongly against it, and a vote is held to decide where he'll be placed. Sure enough, Desir finds himself placed in Beta class. He expected as much though, and he's already prepared to move on to the next step of his plan. When Romantica learns that she's also been assigned to Beta class, her mood sours. After all of the Beta students are in their classroom, she looks over the place and notices how dusty and unkempt it is. On top of that, the professor is a nobody who only teaches what most of them already know. Even though she laments being placed in Beta class, she wonders why Desir is there. He beat the Magic Knight and showed immense talent, so how could they place someone like him in Beta? Desir has seen the future, so he knows just how talented the people in Beta class can be. It could even be said that the school doomed the Earth to destruction, due to its prejudice and insistence on not teaching otherwise talented students properly just because they're commoners. In order to avoid that future, Desir needs to advance as many Beta students as possible to Alpha class. During the class, some Alpha students enter and approach Romantica. Donetta Hadoon is a fellow freshman looking for students to enter his party, and he offers Romantica a position in the Blue Moon Party, the greatest party in the entire academy. If she becomes a member, she can immediately transfer to Alpha class, but she hesitates, and Donetta puts forth one more condition. She can only join if she becomes his girlfriend. He claims to have fallen in love at first sight on the day of the entrance exam and gives her a gold necklace before leaving. While she's looking down at the necklace and thinking, Desir approaches and greets her, surprising her to the point that she falls out of her chair. He gives her the same offer, but she misunderstands at first that he's trying to make her his girlfriend as well. Really, he just wants her to join a party he wants to establish. She asks him what he would choose in his position, a huge popular Alpha party or some random Beta party. Desir has already lived out the timeline where she joined the Alpha party, and it was the worst decision of her life. Instead of giving up, he places a note on her desk that reveals her secret and why she was assigned to the Beta class. Desir takes her outside so others don't overhear. He hasn't told anyone her secret, but many of the professors already know. Why else would she have been assigned to Beta despite being an aristocrat? As it turns out, her family became rich through commerce and bought a poor baron's title, thus placing themselves among the aristocracy when she was 4 years old. Her family title was purchased with money, not inherited through blood. In many of the professor's eyes, a commoner is a commoner from birth. In order to convince her, he even tells her that she can back out after a month with no questions asked. They shake on her joining. They need at least 3 members to make a party though, and even Beta class has well-established parties, so who else would want to join his? He already has an idea. He reassures her and tells her that he knows a professor who will approve their party and that he already has someone in mind as the 3rd candidate. Desir takes her to the training grounds. The person he has in mind is Pram Schneiser, a Beta class swordsman who survived 9 years in the Shadow Labyrinth in Desir's original timeline. From what he remembers, Pram's stabbing attacks alone should have placed him as a swordmaster. Desir describes Pram as the most talented swordsman in Beta class and points out a small blue-haired boy who's preparing for a duel, though all Romantica sees is an adorable creature, the embodiment of ultimate cuteness. To Desir's surprise, Pram chooses a greatsword from the training rack. That's not what Desir remembers. Pram always used a rapier. Pram's duel against an alpha student begins, and he pressures his opponent at first before tiring out and having his sword knocked from his hand. Romantica isn't impressed. Not even a beginner makes the mistake of tiring himself out through his own movements. The duel is clearly already over, but the alpha student isn't done. He charges at the defenseless Pram and throws a punch. Desir yells for the alpha student to stop, but it's already too late. Pram takes the punch straight to the face, and Desir goes to check if he's okay. He even insults the alpha for having a fragile ego, which only angers him even more. The student tightens his grip on his sword as his eyes widen in anger. A moment later, he swings the training blade down on Pram's head as hard as he can. Desir's arm shoots out in the blink of an eye, and the wooden sword snaps in half over his arm and leaves him bleeding. Rather than fighting back, he gives the alpha a hard glare and tells him it's over. The glare reminds the alpha of his own father's glare, and he walks away in disgust. Later, Pram bandages Desir's arm and apologizes for the injury. He can't be thankful enough for how Desir injured himself and made an enemy of an alpha student to protect him. They all make their proper introductions, and Desir takes the opportunity to ask Pram to join his party. Before he can even explain the benefits, Pram agrees without hesitation. They now have the 3 members they need to form a party. The next step is to get the party formally accepted by the school. Luckily, Desir is friendly with Professor Brigitte, and they go to her office. Desir and the professor exchange some small talk before they get to the matter at hand. He explains that his goal is to advance all of his party members to the Alpha class through the advancement exam. That's easier said than done. The exam takes 30 students from each year to enter a 5th level Shadow World and carry out a mission. The top 9 students are labeled as single rankers, and beta students can advance to Alpha depending on how they rank. In other words, Desir is saying that he wants to get them into the top 30, and then the top 9 after that. Since the top 30 are mostly chosen from elite Alpha members of huge parties, any betas to make it in will just be targeted. That only supports Desir's goal though. If they manage to make it to the top 9 despite all of that, then the prejudice against beta class will be revealed as the flimsy excuse it is. The professor finally agrees to formalize the party, but only after asking Pram and Romantica if they still wish to proceed after hearing his true purpose. On their way to their party's room, the group walks through the Hebrion Academy Training Center, passing a virtual zone and a mock arena that are only open to Alpha students to use. Romantica isn't too impressed when she sees the room they've been assigned on the top floor. It's full of boxes, dust, and cobwebs. A rat even runs over Pram's foot. The magical lights around the room turn on, and Desir tries to comfort them until the lights blink out and rat eyes glow in the darkness. The rats scurry around the room and into their rat hole. He has Romantica clear the floor while he blocks the rat hole and opens the windows. Some time passes as they work, and Pram eventually falls asleep. By the time he wakes up, Desir and Romantica have finished cleaning. Rather than going to rest, Desir urges them to train. Their party room is pretty big and offers a lot of space, so it can serve as both an office and a training room. Desir searches around in a box until he finds a heavy ball used for magic training. He tells Romantica she'll be training her magic processing speed. What she showed at the exam wasn't bad, but she'll need to do much better than the alphas if she wants to pass them. For her training, he's going to have her do non-verbal incantations, which she believes to be impossible. Usually magic activates only after a spell is cast, but if you cast them non-verbally, you can instantly use magic without a casting phase. It's definitely not impossible, because he saw the future her casting non-verbally in his original timeline. He has her stand in a circle and move the ball to a circle across the room without throwing it or using physical contact. Instead, she has to move it by controlling the surrounding airstream. It's harder than it sounds, but he already knows she can do it. He urges her on, and she eventually makes it roll a tiny bit forward. Next is Pram, who Desir says is already a perfect swordsman who has nothing to teach. The only thing is that he should be using the rapier. Pram seems shocked when Desir asks why he isn't using it. In order to explain things properly, Pram has Desir follow him. He goes on and says that, though he doesn't know his father, he does know his father was an aristocrat. One of the only things his father left him was a rapier. After finding it when he was 6, Pram became determined to practice and eventually show his father that he was a child to be proud of. His mother always seemed to worry, and before she died, told him never to seek his father out. He was never even told his father's name. His mother's warning makes sense to Desir because if a commoner sought out a nobleman and claimed to be his illegitimate son, he would probably be killed. Despite his mother's warnings, Pram still wanted to find his father, which is why he came to Hebrion Academy, where aristocrats from all over converge. He even had his rapier appraised, which turned out to be nothing but a cheap iron sword. Pram tosses the rapier to the side. Later that night, Desir thinks things over. Why did Pram use a rapier in his past life? it dawns on him that he saw Pram's rapier in his past life as well. Could it be more than it seems? He rushes into the party room the next morning to find Pram training with a greatsword and immediately asks him if he can see the rapier from the other day. Pram reveals that he can't because he already sold it. Desir drags him to the commercial district to a shop with a sign that pretty much says no refunds ever outside the doors. Pram swears once more that he'll never wield the rapier again as they enter and are allowed through an iron door by a barbarian guard. The shop owner greets them and recognizes Pram before saying that he doesn't give refunds. Instead of a refund, Desir offers to buy back the sword. The shop owner tosses the sword onto the table and reveals that, rather than a sword, it's actually a chemovin, a type of container the highborn use when sending gifts to their lovers. Pram is outraged when the merchant offers to sell it back for 40 silver after he sold it for 90 bronze pieces. It's clear he was deceived. Desir tosses 40 silver coins onto the table without a second thought and gives the sword to Pram. Again, Pram says he won't use it, but Desir tells him to dig his nail into a special groove on the handle. The outer metal of the rapier slides off, revealing a beautiful bluish blade that feels as light as a feather in Pram's hands. Of course it would feel that way. It's made of blankium, a metal harder than steel that is said to be unbreakable and nearly weightless, sought after by swordsmen the world over. It's the same sword Desir saw Pram using in his past life. They go to leave, but the barbarian guard blocks their path, and the miserly merchant demands they hand over the sword. When Desir refuses, the barbarian attacks them, but Desir calmly dodges the attack. Before the barbarian can attack again, Pram steps between them and raises his new sword. Pram and the barbarian begin to fight, and Desir observes Pram's stable and nimble movements, which are a huge improvement over when he was wielding the greatsword. Still, barbarians and swordsmen are natural enemies in terms of fighting styles. Barbarians use brute strength, while swordsmen only fight with their weapons. Desir is a bit worried at first, until he sees the aura Pram is emitting. He should be just fine. Their fight continues, and Pram dashes around at incredible speed as he lands shallow cuts on the barbarian again and again, while also avoiding the attacks coming at him. Despite his wounds though, the barbarian revels in the combat and laughs. Unfortunately, Pram isn't able to inflict any deep wounds. The barbarian adjusts and is able to keep up with his speed, so Pram decides he needs to go for a critical blow and targets the barbarian's back. Pram is hit with a hard kick to the stomach as the enemy reads his movement and goes flying, blood spurting out from his mouth as he drops his rapier. Desir tries to step forward to intervene, but Pram stands and stops him. He's determined to do this on his own and charges at the barbarian again. He dodges a feint and slides past before lunging forward at the man's back again. The barbarian smiles and swings his sword straight into Pram's path. There's no time to dodge, and it seems like things might be over. Even the barbarian seems sure of his victory, until he sees the sword in his hand completely missing its upper half. Pram never even intended to dodge the strike and cleanly split the barbarian's heavy blade in one go. Pram's not a murderer though. He switches his grip on the rapier and knocks the barbarian out with a strike up into his jaw. The shop owner still hasn't given up on the sword, and the iron door to the room remains closed. He tells them to hand over the sword if they want to get through before more guards arrive. But Pram, with his blankium sword, easily slashes the door apart. After such a harrowing event, what better way to treat themselves than with some delicious food? Desir thanks Pram and hands him a kebab. All of Desir's actions and words to this point have been filled with wisdom and kindness Pram has never known before, and he swears to himself to follow Desir with all of his heart as he caresses his rapier and thinks over the words engraved on it, that my little bird may not lose his way. Elsewhere, Romantica meets with Donetta, the one who told her she could join his party and be promoted to Alpha if she becomes his girlfriend. They share a meal in the Alpha class dining hall, and she reveals that she wants to return the box with the necklace she received from him and declines his offer. It's not just that she's uncomfortable with dating him like he initially thinks. Rather, she reveals that she already joined a new beta class party. He wonders why she joined if she wasn't threatened, but she tells him it was of her own free will and that she enjoys it. In a shocking reveal, she even tells him that she was born as a commoner. We see his true nature revealed as he calls her and her entire party scum. Romantica accuses aristocrats of always looking down on commoners because they're afraid a commoner populist group will appear if commoners have too much power. Times have changed, and the Academy is still clinging to its old ways. In the new age of Shadow Worlds, anyone with sufficient power can obtain soul stones. The Academy knows this and purposely sends commoners to beta class to prevent them from getting soul stones. In the end, the aristocracy's superiority is like a castle that could crumble at any moment. There's a dark history behind commoner populists fighting for their rights and executing nobles, so Donetta takes her declaration of them being enemies so seriously that he tenses up to the point of digging his fingernails into his own arm and causing himself to bleed. A fire ignites in his eyes. Especially after members of his family died in the last one, he isn't about to let another commoner uprising happen under his watch. We hope you enjoyed the story so far. Check out The Returner's Magic Should Be Special to find out what happens next as Desir and his party face off against the Alpha class.